Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another studio sessions. David Hughes here, manager of the studio, Bendigo's creative industries co-working community. Got a great conversation this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the UNESCO regional cities designations, and I've got representatives from Ballarat, Geelong, and Bendigo here to talk about that. Before I introduce them and we kick off, I just do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, which for myself is the Jaja Rung, and I believe that is where Trevor is as well, and pay our respects to leaders past, present, and emerging. Welcome, Trevor, Tara, and Timothy. Tara, who are the owners of the traditional owners of the lands that you're on today?
We have two mobs. We've got Jaja Warung and Warung. So I guess the traditional owners of the land, and also Torres Strait Islanders as well, that may be living and working in the area too.
Thanks, Tara. And Timothy?
Yes, and the same, the Wadawurrung. So I'd also like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people and the traditional owners of the land that I currently sit on, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, you may be wondering why we don't have Timothy's face talking to us on the screen. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that Timothy is with us and joining us verbally. It was a little bit like a strobe light going on at the time when we got his video on. So we have a picture of the Geelong Library there instead, which not as beautiful as Tim, but is going to do the job for this session. As always, please do contribute to the conversation by putting your comments and questions in the comments section on Facebook. We would love to hear your questions, and we will try and answer them as much as we can. The sessions generally go for about an hour. Now, the UNESCO Creative Cities Network is a network that was created in 2004, and the aim of that network was to make creativity an essential driver for sustainable urban renewal and development. Today, the network comprises of 246 global cities who have committed to placing creativity and cultural industries at the heart of their development plans at the local level and cooperating actively at the international level. Now, the people that we have joining us today are very much involved in the implementation, I suppose, the application and or implementation of this designation. And I'm going to start with an open question to the group, so we'll see who is able to jump in first. And what I want to ask you, why you felt it was important for your city to achieve UNESCO Creative City designation? Well, actually, I might start off with Trevor, seeing as you're in Bendigo. Why was it important for Bendigo? And then we'll move around.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's a really interesting, isn't it, to think back on the motivation. I think there were two things that happened. We were developing a Greater Creative Bendigo strategy, our arts and creative industry strategy, and we were being aspirational, and we thought, how do we reach out beyond just Bendigo? And we were aware of the Creative Cities Network, and it was very coincidental that Geelong had received their designation as a city of design in late 2017, and that really highlighted it. We also had visited Dunedin, who we were aware was a city of literature, and then we started to get talking to people, and we suddenly realised the two things. That one, it was a way of propelling what are relatively small cities in a world scale onto an international platform. But more importantly, it provided a focus in the city and the region around something that people have been talking about. So in terms of our gastronomy, we'd been linking back in gastronomy at a local and regional level for a lot of years, and there were a lot of different threads. And suddenly this became an umbrella, if you like, under which a whole lot of activities could be put together and marketed. And what we found in engaging with people, because at the initial stage, all you do was engage with people and say, well, we're putting in an application. And we were just amazed at the number of people who came forward and said, oh, we want to be part of this. So it became a focal point. It became a launching pad, if you like. and we built from that. So I think they were the two big motivators for us. But I'd be interested to hear from others, Tim and Tara, as to how they came to be putting themselves forward on that international stage.
Tim, maybe we'll jump to you.
Thank you, and apologies everybody that you're not actually seeing my face, and it's just a picture of that is the beautiful Geelong Library. Very similar to Trevor and Bendigo in that we had to look at a bit of our past and us transforming as a city and where we were heading. You know, the city had resolved a community vision to look at where we wanted to be in 30 years. And after, a big process, big consultation, we came up with a community-led 30-year vision of Geelong being Greater Geelong being a clever and creative future. And the UNESCO bid really fitted into that and provides us with a strong role in working towards delivering on that vision. We applied in 2007 and we were designated the City as a design, and we really felt design fitted in with our strong manufacturing credentials. And if we look back in the history, we've been transforming. We've always had a sense of pride and purpose and a strong manufacturing city. But that's changed and shifted with various closures and changes in certain markets, and particularly the automotive industry, and taking advantage of some of those new activities and new things that are happening in the region. So Deakin University, for example, and the work on the waterfront and the big warm ponds facilities with some of the smart technologies coming out of that. So really aligned with everything we're trying to achieve. So taking our proud past in manufacturing and our future and our clever and creative vision.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tim. There's a couple of things that I want to touch on, but before we come from that, we might just hand over to Tara and talk about Ballarat and why Ballarat felt it was an important step to take.
I think out of both Bendigo and Geelong's strategic and well thought through approach about actually seeing this as an international opportunity and putting a lot of thought into the applications and really bringing their community along with them for the ride, Ballarat did completely the opposite. So our main focus really was that we'd spent 2 years focusing in on developing the creative city strategy, really closely consulting with the community, dealing with major fractures across our creative sector, bringing people together to help them articulate a vision of how they saw the city develop themselves. And as that strategy was kind of being put to bed and being put down and then approved by council, across our desk came an opportunity to take that work and fashion it for an approach to UNESCO within the Creative City Network. That 2 years worth of real intense navel gazing, very brave and robust conversations that the community had really gave us the meat of that application that we have to say that we drafted within 2 weeks, because Bendigo and Geelong had both pointed out this is a really valuable thing that we should be doing in the community across regional Victoria, and the window was closing for opportunities for us to apply. So we took the content from our creative city strategy and took a punt. And we were fortunate that the work that we've done has stood us in really good stead. And since then, we genuinely didn't think that we would secure this auspicious designation, and kind of blown away when we did. And it's been a huge honour to be able to work now with Bendigo and Geelong, trying to frantically catch up, I think, on certain levels, and a little bit of the underdog. So we're happy to be that whilst we're just working out where our strengths lie. But I have to put credit back to the creative city strategy work, because that was actually the hard yards. That's what took us along that conversation road, and it just then a door opened up and away we went.
It's interesting. Thanks, Tara. It's interesting how you talk about trying to catch up there. I've had a look at Ballarat's creative cities websites and things, and I think you've got some great stuff on there. It looks really well put together and well thought out. And
thank you.
Is it a case of the down on the surface and the legs underneath going?
We're paddling, yeah, and it's true, but it's easy for us to now move into that communication environment because we've done all of the work. And now we've got this infrastructure around us. We've got a network of people we can call on, a knowledge bank internationally and nationally that we can call on. We've got, regional support networks which are incredibly strong that just weren't there for us as a city before. I've only been in the role 18 months, so it's been a whirlwind, and but a timely one, and one that was meant to happen.
I think it's really important what Tara said, that it suddenly becomes a focal point, and we've found the same thing here in Bendigo and the region. We're working very closely with 8 other municipalities, as obviously the City of Greater Bendigo is the core part, but we're dealing with a whole region here. We've been blown away by the interest and the enthusiasm of people in the region, and it's been quite remarkable, the number of people who come out of the woodwork, if you like, and want to offer to help. And I suspect the same thing is exactly what Tara is saying in Ballarat, and I suspect the same thing has happened in Geelong. And we've heard similar stories from other creative cities around the world, that this just suddenly gives you a huge boost, and people actually put aside perhaps their own little pet projects and seeing the bigger picture, which is really important.
It's too simple to assume that you understand your creative network yourself. There's no way you can actually be that eye across all of your regional city, and I'm sure Tim would bear this out as well, that it's by making the most of this opportunity, you actually shake the tree really hard, and there's lots of really interesting people who come out of wherever their studios are and say, I want a part of it. I want to be part of what this is, because clearly the vision, the site that you have is not at this level, it's at this level. And that's actually what's been really incredibly powerful and heartwarming, is to actually see people putting previous preconceived ideas about the city aside and actually going, well, there's something here that we can do. And that's actually for me been the most heartwarming and the most impressive, just to see how our communities have come together.
Yeah, I'd endorse that. The same in Geelong. It's been pretty astounding and incredible how many good examples of design are across the whole of the city and the region. And as you say, you shake that tree, and every time you turn around, more and more happens. And we're seeing it on a daily basis. The things that we do in council, but certainly external in the organisations and stakeholders and the communities that we work with.
Yeah, we're touching on a topic that I wanted to explore a bit further, and that's around collaboration, really, and working together. What I should probably just acknowledge at this point is, I'll just point out, so Bendigo is a city of gastronomy, Geelong is a city of design, and Ballarat is a city of craft and folk art. And we should probably also acknowledge within Victoria we have Melbourne as well as a city of literature. This conversation I wanted to frame more around the regional aspect, though. The next question I had, Trevor, you touched on the 8 municipalities you're working with. With Bendigo, it's a city and region of gastronomy, I noted. How are you guys looking to work together to leverage this opportunity, I suppose? I know that you kind of talk to each other, but what are the opportunities that you see from everyone having that designation, and what can come from that?
Yeah,
pre or post COVID.
Yeah, right. Yeah, both. Yeah. Yeah, really good.
COVID's tilted our original concepts and our work. A bit of a blow, but not internal. I don't think it's a death knell, but it's certainly been a bit of a blow trying to work around it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Trevor, you were saying.
That's right. Sorry. A really interesting concept, Dave. When we had a look at the other cities around the world that were cities of gastronomy, we noticed that almost all of them were talking about their region, because that's where the product comes from in terms of gastronomy. Few urban areas have a major. They might have some great bars and some, they might have somebody making some great distill gin or something like that, and they might have some good farmers markets, but they're not really growing a lot of produce. So when we had a look at the other regions, there were two things we noticed. One, that those regions were quite large. In some cases, the regions are bigger than even the region we draw upon. But secondly, many of the cities, not all, but most of the cities in the gastronomy network, and there's 36 across the world, are actually quite small cities. There's a couple of big ones in China. Some of them rattled off the names of them. You never would have heard of these cities. And for instance, one of the cities that we've got to know really well is the city of Alba in Italy. It's got 20,000 people. It happens to be I think the hazelnut capital of the world, and we particularly lined up ourselves with a city called Östersund in Sweden, which is a city of about 50,000 people, which relates to a region twice the size of the region that we relate to. So that was really important to understand that you didn't have to be a big glamour city. And it's certainly based on, for instance, in gastronomy, people said, but you haven't got, where's your 3 Michelin star restaurant? But that's not what the story is about. The story is about the diversity of product. So the reverse of that is, rather than focus on, high star restaurants, we've discovered that with a bit of ongoing research, there are 395 artisanal agriculture producers in our region. These are small-scale businesses where they are value adding at the local level. So this isn't, say, a product that just gets produced at a farm and then it's shipped off to somewhere else. Somebody doing something with that product on their land, and they're adding value to it. And so this artisanal agriculture is a really unifying theme. Another thing that we've found with the collaboration is that once you set these sort of broad parameters, the collaboration isn't just in our region. We're having regular meetings with the other cities across the gastronomy network. They link up. And so we've been sharing a lot of things. We've actually been sharing information about how we've been handling the pandemic. And then, of course, the other thing which has been fantastic is that the 4 cities in Victoria we've formed the Victorian Creative Cities Network. And all of a sudden, the Victorian government, particularly through Creative Victoria, sat up and said, hey, wait on, we've got 4 of the 6 Australian creative cities in Victoria. You guys are actually driving the agenda here. And I think that we're still coping with the implications of that. The 3 of these cities are in regional Victoria. It's not just a Melbourne thing. And we've observed similar things around the world. And I think I know that Tim, because I've been involved in the Creative Cities Network for a couple of years longer than both Ballarat and Geelong, you've had tremendous success in dealing and working with cities around the world, and you've formed some great partnerships with other cities. So this is what we're also finding, that these partnerships are really strong.
So Tim, you've as Trevor alluded today, Geelong has had the designation for a couple more years than Ballarat or Bendigo, since 2017. I'm wondering, whether you're sharing any insights, things that you've learned along the way for Bendigo and Ballarat, and what those might be. But also, if you're able to share from your experience, what are some of the opportunities that exist for local creatives from Geelong's perspective? What are some of those opportunities that have been able to come to the fore as a result of this designation, do you think?
Sure. Look, I'll take the first question first. In terms of the collaborations and the opportunities that it's provided us internationally, it's been fantastic. You tend to home to cities like cities. So, our strongest collaborations are probably with some of the cities that are furthest away from us. So Dundee in Scotland and Kortrijk in Belgium. They have a similar history to us. They've come from traditional manufacturing, and they've had to transform and reinvent themselves as cities just like Geelong. And they're a similar scale to us, right? So, you tend to hone to those cities. And then you realise you've probably got the same challenges and opportunities. So the opportunity to talk with them and work with them and visit those places, and then coming to Geelong as well, has been enabled us to share some of those solutions that we can implement into our own communities. So, reinforcing something that Trevor said, that sharing and collaboration on a global environment and scale has been invaluable to us, and we're going to continue to do that. And in terms of advice, and what have we learned in the 2017, home to the cities that you're like, because some of them, there's 40 cities in the City of Design network. Some of them are multi-million population cities. Well, it's totally different scale and challenges than a regional city like Geelong. So as much as we interact and communicate and collaborate, not as much as we would with the ones that are like us. So I think that international collaboration, the opportunity it's given us, it has been fantastic, and we'll continue on that path. Dave, your second question was around the opportunities for creatives.
Yeah, so obviously, from our perspective, our audience is all about the local creative community. And I'm wondering, as a local creative, one might wonder, okay, we've got this creative city designation. What opportunities is that going to open up for me as a local creative?
So I'll answer that twofold. One is there's certain projects that we would probably never have done if we hadn't been designated as the UNESCO City of Design. One of those is Geelong Design Week. Which was really to put a spotlight on the local creatives and drawing attention to that design and creativity that we have in Geelong, and showcase that excellence and give them a platform to do that. Unfortunately, our first ever was postponed because of COVID. We were right on the cusp of delivery. Nevertheless, what it did demonstrate is that there was a huge appetite, and we had planned over 85 events over a couple of week period. So not to be deterred, we are now in full process of planning for next year, so March of next year, and we hope to have a hopefully bigger and better program. The other one is through the network, you get a lot of call outs from other cities that want support or input or people to come and work with on a particular opportunity or issue that they have in their city. So, we wouldn't get those opportunities if we weren't part of the network, right? We can then get those opportunities, and then we can share them across our stakeholders and our network and let them pitch and take advantage of working with those other cities. So we act as a facilitator. We don't have to do the do, but we can facilitate and join the dots and enable those organisations to work together and expose them to some of the global opportunities that exist.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Tim. And I noted from the Design Week, COVID has knocked a lot of things onto their proverbial. I noticed that the theme for the Design Week next year, I forget now, it's something along the lines of unexpected. No.
It's unpredictable.
Unpredictable. I thought that's perfect for the kind of times.
Yes. So I take no credit for that. That's a curatorial group that have done all the hard thinking to put that in place. But I think it's pretty apt for the times we're living in right now.
Summed it up in a word for me. One of the things that seems to be coming through from this conversation for me is, that seems to be relevant for all the cities, is looking back, I suppose, or looking at what the strengths of the city are, to some degree what the history is, but also just to what the current strengths are. And then looking forward as well to what the city could be. And Tim, you used the word reinvention as you were talking there. Tara, in the Ballarat Creative City Strategy, the strategy is described as future-proofing the city of Ballarat. So again, looking to the future to try and strengthen what Ballarat is. Can you perhaps talk a bit to that, about how you see the creative strategy and maybe the designation as well, looking to future-proof Ballarat?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the most important things for us to touch on is that we actually have the designation of craft and folk art, which is, for Australia, really hard to get your head around, because folk art is, we automatically think of dollies and costumes, and so we have a bit of a block. But the reality is that actually folk art is about our Indigenous intangible cultural heritage. So For us, it's actually looking backwards so we can look forwards. It's actually looking, one of the things about Ballarat, which is shared with Bendigo, is that we're gold rush cities. And we worked pretty hard at the early time of the gold rush to crunch as much of the storytelling as possible from previous owners of the land. So our job, and I'm sure Bendigo shares this obligation as well under the gastronomy designation, is to track back to see how much we can actually restore from lost stories, lost trades, lost arts, lost crafts, and actually bring those forward for modern interpretation. So for us, it's easier to look forward. We actually have to look back. We also sit on clay. We, like Bendigo, we're cities of the goldfields. So the clay becomes is an incredibly important part of the ceramic practices of our city. So we're actually very much concentrating on Indigenous cultural, intangible cultural heritage, ceramics, and then textiles as well, underneath the designation of craft and folk art, because it's a very wide designation. And I echo completely Trevor and Tim's remarks concerning international connections. We've got a really strong connection with Incheon in South Korea and Limoges in France, and also with Nassau in Malaysia. And we've got some incredible skills and knowledge that we've received from them, because certainly in areas in Incheon, there's been colonisation which has actually overwritten their previous stories. So they've had to go back and look in time to actually reclaim some of their skills and lost folk art. How that helps our creatives today in the future-proofing aspect of the Creative City Strategy, it's a neat crossover point with what the United Nations is really looking at, that sustainability of practice. And the Creative City Strategy, that is its main intent. It doesn't matter if you're wanting to establish a fine art practice in the City of Ballarat, or you just want to put your website programming company and its game design attributes in the city as well. They fall under the creative industries banner, from creative industry through to fine art. It's a very wide school, as we as council representatives know. It's incredibly big. So our objective is to ensure that it doesn't matter what kind of practice it is you want to establish or you have established in the city has an obligation to try and provide as much in the way of footholds for your practice to become a sustainable one. And sustainability is a different interpretation depending upon who you are. You might want to be growing your medium-sized business into a large one. You might want to move off your kitchen table and actually into the shop front. Or you just might wish to have the opportunity to stay at home and do the work that you love doing. We want to create environments in which all of those opportunities are possible, and that practice that you view as sustainable. Future-proofing the city, we're only as good as our next best idea. And so if we sustain each of those different parts of the spectrum, we actually give people the tools, whether it's training, space, support, education, whatever the materials are. If we sustain them, then we're actually future-proofing your city for better ideas. And that's particularly important now, because COVID has blown just everything open. And if we put all our money in one area, the risks are just too great. But if we actually seed little grenades and little Easter eggs all over the city that are sustainable, then I've got a more resilient arts and culture sector, I've got a more resilient creative industry sector, and then the next best idea is going to come from those resilient people. And as a regional town, like all regional towns and cities, we're now looking inwards to the answers, because we can't look outwards to Melbourne, we can't look outwards to international tourists or travellers. We actually are looking inwards to ourselves. And that's what the future-proofing is all about.
I'd like to jump in here. I think Tara makes an excellent point around sustainability. And ultimately, the point of the network is to deliver on the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals, right? And particularly number 11, which is sustainable cities. So how are we developing sustainable, resilient and inclusive cities? And, we happen to be using design as our creative way to do that, and it's gastronomy or it's folk and crafts art. Sorry, got that wrong.
It's okay, everyone does.
But I think that's the point. That's what we're all driving towards to deliver. And I think, councils having the designation, it really embodies what we're trying to do anyway, right? So it really elevates that through our particular designation. So we really have an opportunity to put those policies and practices and projects in place to support our communities so they are future-proofed.
I think what you're hearing...
Sorry, I was going to cut across you, Trevor, there, because one of the really important things I constantly actually having to articulate as well, that local government's often seen as like the solution provider, the answer to everything. Like, because federal government's going to let me down, state government's going to let me down. Don't worry, the council ought to do something about insert thing here. One of my favourite lines at the moment is, "We're council, we're not your mum." You know, we can actually provide you with infrastructure and opportunities to lift off to somewhere else, should you choose to take them. But it's definitely not something that we obviously, it's public money. So we have a duty bound to ensure that that is best used in the most effective way possible, and that we can report on the way it's been applied. Now, because it's creativity, you can't necessarily say, "Oh, I sold 15 million more widgets last week than I did the week before because council gave me money." We need different tools, different ways to measure success, different ways to measure that resilience, and different ways to measure that sustainable, resilient cities. And I think now's the time to do that. Neoliberalism has kind of shot itself in the foot, so maybe now it's time for a new thinking.
I think what you're hearing, Dave, is that what the creative and the association of each city with a particular one of the 7 themes that's that UNESCO put out, it actually goes to the narrative of the city. So you end up constructing a narrative around a core of creativity, but then hone in on one element of creativity. So to emphasise that point, we, right from when we received our application and now going forward with our 4-year action plan, implementation framework and action plan that we've developed, we have 4 themes, and those themes encapsulate what we've talked about. So our first theme is we had 35,000 years of a sustainable food system in our region with the Judge Rung, and we sort of intervened in that and we sort of lost it. But working with the Jar Jar Rung has been fantastic in how they are saying, how can we replace what they were doing and build anew? And so some of the initiatives that they've got around things like kangaroo grass, and the yam daisy, the burn-on, it's saying we can still do that. Now, as you hear me talk about the other 3 themes, see how we actually complete the circle. Now, our second is just creativity. And as Tara has indicated, and as Tim has indicated with Geelong, with a sort of new settlements in the 19th century, we had to be creative. We had to work out how to live on a really tough landscape. We had to invent new products. And, you know, Geelong's a great example of inventing new products. In Ballarat and Bendigo, they invented new ways of doing mining, how to get water to places, how to build railways, all these things with whole creativity. But we also did that with diversity. There were people brought from all around the world. So that was our second theme, that we are creative. And when you put forward an application to UNESCO, you don't just talk about the theme that you had. You have to demonstrate in the first instance you're a creative city. And then you say what are you creative in. Our third theme was a really challenging and interesting concept. We know that we've got major health problems in Australia, and in many cases, regions are actually some of our most health areas, particularly with cardiovascular disease, obesity, and so on. And so we said we can't really be a sustainable creative city unless we're prepared to tackle what is an immense health problem. So we've actually focused around the idea of nutrition. How do we get people to understand a much more nutritional diet? How do we get them to live a much healthier life? And of course, the first choice in that is what sort of foods are you eating? What is going into your diet? And this is, we've able to link up with an amazing program called the Active Living Census and the Healthy Heart of Victoria, which have been initiatives at the regional level to focus on this idea of a much healthier diet. And then our last is in an era of climate change, with our food production, how are we going to do this in an era of climate change? Well, that's got sustainability all over it. But if you think about it, it comes back to the starting point. Our Indigenous community not only had a sustainable food system, but we know they lived through droughts, through fire. We even had active volcanoes in the region. They had a disruptive regional landscape to deal with, but they managed to sustain themselves. They had the floods, all the things that we think of just about what's happened in the last 170 years or so. They're experiencing these for 30, 40,000 years, and they managed to have a sustainable food system. So this is part of the narrative of your city. It's part of the narrative of your region. And I think what you're hearing from Ballarat, Bendigo and Geelong is that we've adapted that narrative to the story that we want to tell about our region. And it's a really interesting idea. If you collect what Ballarat's doing and what Geelong's doing and what Bendigo's doing, they actually all reinforce each other, because we've all got the same stories. We've all been involved in design. We've all been involved in folk and craft, and and so it goes on across the region. And just to finish off on that, one of the other categories is literature. And we have a very successful Writers' Festival. We're proposing in May 2022 it'll be a combination of gastronomy and literature, because what are the biggest selling books in the world? Cookbooks, food books, wine books. And in fact, the two go beautifully together. So this is how we can package things up. And certainly Geelong's been very, very ambitiously talking about how can we bring together perhaps a mini example of bringing together a number of cities from around the world that can celebrate the diversity, not just in the categories that we're in, but in a wider group of categories that the UNESCO has identified. We haven't talked about music, which is one of the other categories. We haven't talked about film, which is another one of the categories. So there's opportunities to collaborate even on a wider framework than our individual designations.
Well, Trevor, when you do the Writers' Festival and you work with Melbourne on the cookbook, then let's get Geelong to design it, and you can serve all the meals on the ceramic plates that we produce.
Exactly.
And then, there you go.
And collaboration.
Yeah.
Huge collaboration.
I'll give you an interesting collaboration. Tara talked about, Bendigo and Ballarat are built on clay. One of the things that we featured in our application was the fact that we had Bendigo Pottery basically providing dinnerware for Australians for the last 160 years. I think just about every home in Australia has got an example of Bendigo Pottery. That's from the clay, but it's also got a gastronomy link. And at the moment, the Bendigo Pottery is providing the dinnerware for about 1/3 of the 50 top restaurants in Australia. So you can see how these things link together. It's not just about, perhaps fine food and wine. There's so many sub-stories in what we're talking about.
So thanks, Trevor. You touched on there some of the other designations. So just for everyone's information, I'll just run through them. There's 7 designations. Craft and folk art, obviously, design and gastronomy being the 3 that we have represented here. But there's also film, literature, which Melbourne obviously of. There's music and there's media arts as well. So there's a good range there. Tara, you mentioned you touched on the COVID situation that we find ourselves in earlier in this conversation. Obviously, the creative industries we know have been one of the hardest hits by COVID. I suppose a question that I have is, has there been any benefit from being part of a creative cities network in terms of support of each other, or how we learn how to support our creative industries through a time like this?
Several different ways. The international network has definitely stepped up in that area. That's actually provided us with some insights into how cities around the world, definitely ones that are worse struck than than Australian cities are. We have had, touch wood, presently, Melbourne, considered, being sort of not really touched by the incidents quite so much until more recently. And the international responses from cities around the world, such as those in Italy or in Brazil, have provided some really, particularly for Ballarat, particularly really good insights into how the city has decided, those particular cities have decided to rally around their creative industries. We've been party to international networks where these big panel discussions are discussing the impacts and how each city has basically responded. And it's been interesting to sort of watch that from an Australian perspective. There is no simple answer to how to actually support the creative industries through a global pandemic. And I think if any one of us in this panel just had the answers now, we would definitely be millionaires, but we're not. So it's the responses that we've actually planned through Ballarat have, they're having the designation and having an increased perception of the importance of creativity through the Creative Cities strategy has increased the profile of creative thinking and solutions inside Ballarat City Council. So within 48 hours of the COVID crisis hitting Australian shores, the first lockdowns, the first 24 were dedicated to emergency response. The next 24 were dedicated to cultural response. And that came because the directors were at that level and they understood that not only is this a sector that is going to be deeply affected and will be the first affected, they are also a sector who actually provides the content for the rest of the mainstream community. So if we can channel that need, because people are going to be in lockdown for 6 weeks, they're going to need something to do, read, see, be involved in, participate in. Who better to provide that than our own creatives? So as their external work fell, we dedicated investments, an extreme amount of money, well, not extreme for me, because actually arts and culture never has a lot of money to spend. They actually siphoned money out of another part of council and said, go, we need a cultural response. And that was a 6-week program that turned out to be 10 projects that ended up reaching in excess of 136,000 people. And a good proportion, a significant proportion of that participated, downloaded, engaged. And that program of work funded and sustained our creative, as many of our creative sector as we could afford to sustain. So that's an actual real life example where we actually had a creative city strategy that seemed all sort of a bit wishy-washy and a bit strategy-like and, could be left on the shelf to gather dust if you don't pay attention to it. We actually had the foresight. We had directors who actually went, no, there's something in this. We need to apply it. And they took a risk. They took a punt on it and they went for it. And we had less than 3 days to pull together a full strategy, which we did. And now we've just finished doing the wrap-up report on that now, just as we're about to go into phase 2 lockdown. So sadly, I wish we could continue to sustain that kind of level of support, but we probably can't. So yeah,
we've got similar stories to share in Geelong. We recently just instead of, because the AGM was cancelled for obvious reasons, the City of Design network held a virtual get together. Which would prove hugely successful because often people are restricted by travel and budgets and the like. So we had more engagement and more people involved, which was really good, again, to share. And we were lucky enough, one of our responses that had come out of Geelong, which was a visitor pod, which had been specifically designed to enable family members to visit people during COVID lockdown, showcased on an international stage. That got a lot of traction and pick up in particularly the European market and America. So we were lucky enough to be able to showcase that design and one response from our sector and our city to COVID. So it was a real benefit for us. And like Tara in Ballarat, engaging with the creative sector to provide responses to the challenges we're under, and putting money towards that as well. So we're in the throes of going out to the creative sector to commission pieces of art to connect people with the place again. And that's very much got a theme of UNESCO and the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals throughout the whole of that piece of work. So in a number of ways, it's hopefully putting some money to the creative sector, which we know has been really hit hard, but also what we get in return in improving that connectivity and that connection with place, which we're going to have to, to drive moving forward.
Yeah, it's very much reflect the same thing. As Tara said, it really having a creative strategy really honed in on the importance of this sector in the economy. And sometimes you only know the importance of something when it's suddenly taken away from you, and suddenly you realise there's a big vacuum there that has to be filled. But two things that have happened in our respect. One is we launch in about 3 weeks what's called the Bendigo Innovation and Inventors Festival. It's something that you know a lot about, Dave, with your past work. But the 10th anniversary of the festival, obviously we're conducting this entirely virtually now. But ironically, we've actually been able to gather together probably a better stellar cast of presenters, because they don't actually have to all travel to Bendigo and all have to be available at the exact same time. So we've got some people live, we've got some people who've done broadcasts. I think just today we managed to get Anthony Albanese to do a video, and he'll be one of the presenters. We would never be able to get a person like that, obviously, or very unlikely to get a person like that to come to Bendigo. So that's been an amazing journey where we were going to have it live, and then we've gone virtual. Now it's going to be extended, and we'll actually have a major gastronomy component of that early next year. And again, almost certainly be virtual. But the other thing that's happened, and this is something, of course, we could never have anticipated, in an era of issues around food and access to food, suddenly food has become central to what we do and how we respond in the COVID situation. So we very early in the pandemic, we're talking with cities in particularly, and Tim's mentioned them, in Brazil and Italy. I mean, we were one of the cities in Italy that we've been talking to, a city called Bergamo, which is about 100,000 people. They had 8,000 deaths from the pandemic in that city. So 8% of the population died. But the whole issue around access to food and access to food for vulnerable people is critical. And we very quickly found that food share programs at the local and regional level suddenly became heightened. And what we've seen, remarkably, and this is the sort of creativity and inventiveness of people, the number of people who are food producers in their own right in a small scale or a large scale way, the way they've adapted to online selling has been remarkable. It's almost as though we've taken 3 to 5 years of evolution of online selling, and it's been compressed into the last 3 to 5 months. And so we've had a number of businesses, many businesses, who we thought would have really struggled, have suddenly had to adapt themselves and had to create their own website, create their own system of online selling. So it's like similar. I think every time there's a major trauma in the world, adaptation, creativity, opportunism, inventiveness comes to the surface. And we've seen that right across this period. And you've heard examples from Ballarat and Bendigo, Geelong, and Bendigo's the same.
Yeah, it's probably a good segue to a question that I had been wanting to ask. Before I do, though, Christine has asked a question about any advantages to Victoria having 4 UNESCO created cities. I think you touched on that before, Trevor, about how suddenly the state government stood up and take notice and acknowledge that regional Victoria is taking kind of control of the situation, and leading the charge on that. But the question I was going to ask is, just going into the last 10 minutes, but also. And so if anybody else has any questions, please do ask them via the Facebook comments. The question I had was, what's the most unexpected or surprising outcome or thing that's happened since you've joined the UNESCO Creative Cities family?
I've got a couple I wouldn't mind sharing, and I think it goes back to what we started with in the conversation, is how many people have come out of the woodwork that are doing some really smart things in the design space, right?
Yeah,
You know, we've run some Petroculture Nights, which is a way of presenting a particular topic, and some of the people that have come and presented, it's just been phenomenal for us. So that's been really good. That's been a bit of a surprise to me. I've fortunately had the opportunity to go to a couple of the AGMs and the opportunity to present Geelong's clever and creative vision and a design history and our future. That was one of the more unexpected outcomes of going into this, because not many cities get the opportunity to do that, because it's clearly you've got 200 plus cities all wanting their 15 minutes of fame, and Geelong was selected. So for me, an unexpected outcome, and one that was invaluable to us here in Geelong.
The two things I would reflect on, Dave, are firstly very similar to Tim. All of a sudden, people came out of the woodwork that we didn't know. So one of the things we did was to form an advisory committee to council, and we put out a wide expression of interest, and we were surprised at the people that we didn't even know existed in the region, and the history that these people had. I mean, we found people who'd been 30, 40, in one case, a retired person who had 30, 40 years history in restaurants right across Victoria. We found another person who had, in their tertiary studies, had visited every creative city of gastronomy in the world, and was wanting to share their knowledge with us. A person in Dalesford. So it wasn't just people in Bendigo, it was people across the region. The other thing was the warmth of the existing cities across the world in gastronomy. So in the gastronomy network, we have a system whereby the person from the existing network is appointed as your mentor for your city. So we've had this amazing relationship with this a guy called Doug Hartman from Östersund in Sweden, who was in charge of the network. He's now our mentor. But we've been welcomed by so many other cities. It just seems that the moment that you are in the creative network, you're in an open door network. We feel quite confident in contacting anyone in the gastronomy network, but even in the wider network, and we know we'll get a response. It's a very difficult thing for any city, particularly in the remote part of the world, to suddenly make a contact with some city somewhere else in the world. And some of these are really big cities. One of the cities in the gastronomy network is the city of Chengdu in China. Not that we have yet, but if our mayor was to write to the mayor of Chengdu in China, we know we get a response because you're part of the network. And I think that's been a real eye-opener for us.
You're great.
Unexpected outcomes. From a craft and folk art perspective, I think the actual fact that we got into the network was a hugely unexpected outcome, which we accepted with relish. But at the time, it was like, really? Okay, let's get started. So there was that was probably the first most unexpected outcome. I think the second one for us as well was then because we didn't have the virtue of time that I think Bendigo and Geelong had invested in educating their community about what the network was and what it was going to offer and how it worked. That the unexpected outcome for me was actually then having to communicate to various different parts of the arts and culture sector of Ballarat to explain craft and folk art designation. So there was a little bit of resistance, a little bit of misunderstanding about the perception about what that meant. Was it meaning that the other art forms were going to be excluded? And a lot of conversation that I wasn't expecting. I genuinely thought, great, everyone's going to see this as the opportunity that I see it. And I learned pretty quickly that wasn't the case. We've worked quite diligently on trying to communicate, the various merits that come with this program. But it is it's an interesting process to go through when you've actually surprised some people with the outcome. And how do you take a creative group with you to understand what the assets and benefits are? So that's been a surprising outcome as well. But I think I just echo the other mentions that Trevor and Tim was talking about, this sort of connections that have opened up. For instance, Deanne Gilson, who's a Wadawurrung woman and a practicing and a very well-established and sort of highly recognised artist from a very strong artist family here in Ballarat, had the opportunity to have her work exhibited at a craft exhibition in China in April of this year, sadly cancelled due to COVID. But we took the opportunity anyway to profile her work and her practice, package it up as a video and send it over to the conference anyway. So that unexpected opportunities just falling from the ceiling for our creatives, potentially be able to take them overseas, export their work, introduce them to new distributors if they're large enough. I don't think we've even begun to flex that muscle yet because of COVID and everything else that's actually happened since. So I'm personally really excited by the opportunities that particularly some of the artisans and makers that we represent, the door's going to be open to them so much more wider than it ever has been before.
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic.
Dave, we've got a number of cities around the world that regularly invite chefs from the creative cities to go to their city and demonstrate their craft. And those cities are prepared to pay the costs for the chef to travel there and their accommodation. We had 2 lined up, one in Turkey, one in China, all cancelled because of COVID. But you can see the opportunities that suddenly emerge.
Great. Thank you, guys. With answering that question, you've probably answered the question I was going to ask next, which is probably for the best because we are just about out of time. The question I was going to ask next was, do you feel that the community is proud of the UNESCO designation and that people in the community are owning the title and running with it? But the response that you've just given me about people coming out of the woodwork and people feeling very kind of engaged and passionate about it, I think that answers that question for me. Thank you so much for your time, guys. It's been a really interesting and eye-opening conversation for me, and I hope for those who have tuned in as well. We've covered a lot of ground. I mean, we've talked about the history of the cities. We've talked about the vision for the future for the cities. We've touched on health, Indigenous engagement, climate change, local and international opportunities. We've touched on COVID, and we've touched on a lot more as well. So thank you so much for your openness and for your contribution to this conversation. And all that remains for me to say is thank you for those who tuned in. Next week, we'll be doing a session on fashion, and you can find out more about that on our Facebook page and our website, obviously. But other than that, everybody stay safe. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Tim. And speak soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.